How many world-class players do Ireland have? Like, really have. Genuinely world-class players. They're the number one team in the world. They're looking like they're well-placed for a Grand Slam and to go beyond what the national team has ever done before at a World Cup and go beyond a quarter-final. How good are these individuals? That's what I want to look into on this video. And I'm classing world-class as someone who would be a contender, a real contender for a team of the year, a best team on earth right now. If you were picking a world 15, who would be a contender? So have to be in probably the top 2 in your position. Maybe I could stretch it to 3. And on that basis, the first person going straight in is Tadhg Furlong, which it's important to remember. Ireland looking as good as they are, they're without some big players. And Tadhg Furlong being one of them. 30 years of age, 62 international caps, 6 British and Irish Lions caps, an anchor of the set piece, which is absolutely essential. Despite the fact there was only, I think, there was like a crazily small number of scrums in the Ireland versus France game. I think there might have only been 5 scrums in the game. Nevertheless, come World Cup time, when you maybe need to squeeze out a penalty or avoid the opponents getting a penalty, you need an anchor in your set piece, but he does a lot more around the park than that, which is why he is the best in his position on earth. And Ireland are doing all right with Finlay Bealham just now. Second player that I would say is world-class, Johnny Sexton. This is an interesting one. 37 years of age, won it all. As far as an Irishman is concerned, obviously there's one big prize that Johnny Sexton is still coveting, which is why he's still going at the age of 37 and showing the kind of tenacity and ambition that he still is. Made his debut in 2009, World Player of the Year in 2018. There may well be other better fly halves close to it, but Johnny Sexton's right up there. He's the captain of the number one team in the world, and he's still performing, which is remarkable. And I wonder, what would the story of Johnny Sexton be were he French or English? Because I think those domestic systems kind of chew you up and spit you out a little bit, that you get flogged. And also, there's so many other options. You know, we've had this. I think Owen Farrell, for example, gets a lot of criticism, partly because there's Marcus Smith, this young gun, and Ireland don't have that same level of depth. They have quality, but they don't have the same level of depth. So Johnny Sexton has kind of been their main man and left to it. So even when he was 30, 33, 34, 35, people weren't really questioning his role in the team because that's all there was. Whereas Owen Farrell is constantly criticised, despite, I think, Owen Farrell being one of the best in the world. Owen Farrell gets criticism purely because there are other players around. So it's just quite interesting. And I also think Johnny Sexton is the biggest feather in the cap for the Irish system, because the fact that they've been able to protect and limit the amount of game time he has. So he just plays in the big Heineken Cup and URC matches, and that's just lengthened his career massively. So he is world-class. Josh van der Flier, current World Player of the Year. How can he not be regarded as world-class and one of the best in his position in a very, very competitive position on the open side flank? So that's 3 already for Ireland. Josh van der Flier is at a prime age as well. When you think towards the World Cup, he's 29 right now. He's approaching 50 caps for his country, and he will have World Cup glory and a British and Irish Lions cap on his to-do list. Because it's mad to think that only 2 years ago he wasn't considered for the Lions, and there he is, World Player of the Year 2022. Next player, Gary Ringrose. I think he's having an absolutely unreal season, and he keeps getting better. And again, another player, prime age, he's 28, and this is another very tricky position to pick when you look around the world. A lot of really good 13s. You've got Lecanio Am, probably just would edge him in a world team. Maybe Lecanio Am would probably get the starting spot, but Gary Ringrose is pushing him hard with Gael Fickou, with Rico Ioane, with if he ever gets playing again for Fiji, Semi Randrandra. Some really good outside centres, but Gary Ringrose is, I said this on a recent video, I think he might be the most irreplaceable player for Ireland, which is mad to think when you got Johnny Sexton there. But I think if Gary Ringrose gets injured, the drop-off from first choice to second choice in that position is massive. And I think he might be Ireland's most important player as they look towards the World Cup. Definitely world-class right now. As is Tadhg Byrne. Another player that Ireland are going to have to do without for the foreseeable future, and hoping he gets back very well. But just the man's carved the granite. 31 years of age. We all know his story. The late bloomer, discarded by the Leinster Academy, and then went the long way round. Considered playing for Wales because he qualified in Scarlets. Just a really unique talent and an all-rounder, and a menace at the breakdown. Brilliant line out forward. Just hard as nails. And Eben Etzebeth would be the best lock right now. Tadhg Byrne would be a worthy player to go alongside him, with other contenders, I guess, being Sam Whitelock, Brodie Retallick, Paul Willemse, maybe, but you wouldn't argue against Etzebeth and Tadhg Byrne as your lock pairing. And on that basis, there's 5 world-class players for Ireland. Are there any more? Yeah. I think you'd have to consider Robbie Henshaw in that category as well. Another player Ireland are doing without. And Robbie Henshaw, another player who is coming into that prime age. He's 29 right now. 61 caps. Damien Dialende for South Africa might get the starting berth in a World 15. However, whenever South Africa and Ireland have played against each other, that individual matchup, Robbie Henshaw has got the better of it. And I'll tell you what, so far, 6 players that I would happily take in the England team and swap them for whoever you want, because these guys are absolutely class. And yet it goes on, because Kailyn Doris has elevated himself to world-class status. Again, I said world-class status is players who would be considered for a World 15, and right now you would be picking the number 8 between Kailyn Doris and Ardie Savea. They're both young. Kailyn Doris is 24. I think he's just had just over 20, maybe 25, approaching 30 caps for Ireland. And he has just rocketed his form in the last couple of years. Remember when he was coming into the team, he was put on the blindside flank, and Peter Romani had a little dip in form, and Jack Conan was the number 8. And that little battle for the number 8 jersey at Leinster has really pushed Kailyn Doris to another level. And he's just a 21st century forward. Gregory Aldrit would also be in the shout in the number 8 position. But I think right now it's Doris or Savea, and I could take either. Albeit Ardie Savea would probably have like to say he hasn't had a chance to show what he's about, as Kailyn Doris has just had 2 great games in the Six Nations. So there you go. How many's that now we're on? 7 world-class players right now, based on the criteria that they'd be in serious consideration for a World 15. Hugo Keenan, and like Kailyn Doris, another player who has moved himself into that position. Now, again, I wouldn't put Kailyn Doris in a World 15 starting side. Probably Beauden Barrett might get in ahead of him. And there's arguably others, but he's playing that well. And I guess the question is, how much of this is that they're operating within a team that are well coached and doing well collectively, and how much is this a lot of great individuals coming together? Well, I think Hugo Keenan, on the things he does brilliantly are individual elements, being able to be in the right place at the right time, the timing of his positioning, his defensive work, spotting gaps and breaks. It's the guy's operating on another level right now, and along with Kailyn Doris is looking set to be player of the Six Nations as it currently stands. So there we go. Is that the lot then? No, not as far as I'm concerned. I think there's one more player that deserves to be regarded as potentially world class. Who do you reckon it is? What are you thinking? I'm saying Andrew Porter. Now, he's had a fair bit of criticism in recent months. I've been a massive fan of this guy for years. I live in Manchester, and I remember it was what year would it have been? 2016? The Under-20 World Championships was held in Manchester, and I worked at it. And I think it was Andrew Porter and Jacob Stockdale. I just saw them and thought, these guys are different gravy. They are on another level. And then he was phenomenal. To change sides of the scrum so he can operate a tight head and loose head, and to be as destructive as he is around the park, I don't think there's anyone better at that. The one criticism he has had is set piece. I honestly think it's been all right. It's been all right. He's going to get tested. There's no doubt about that. But Andrew Porter is answering those questions. And I'd say let's assume Andy Farrell is going to be the Lions coach in 2025. I think there's a good chance of that. There's an argument that Andrew Porter is the most valuable player to the British and Irish Lions because he's one of the very few front row forwards who can play multiple positions. And that makes him absolutely invaluable because he allows you to select an extra person if you want to. I think he is in contention. Probably Stephen Kitsoff would get the starting jersey on the loosehead side, and Tadhg Furlong obviously would get the starting job on the tighthead side. But I think there's an argument that Andrew Porter would be a bench consideration for a World Team of the Year. And on that basis alone, I regard him as world class. So look at that. 9 players that I think are legitimately in the category of being world class right now. And when you look at the rest of the team, Jameson Gibson-Park's not too shabby. Dan Sheehan's not far off. James Ryan's a good player. Peter Romani's been around the block a few times. James Lowe. The whole team, I'll tell you what it has a feel to me of. And I'm a proud Englishman. I just love my rugby in general, but I'm a proud Englishman. It feels to me like 2003 England. 2003 England beat all of the potential competitors for the World Cup in the year or so before the World Cup. And they said psychologically that was absolutely massive. And that England 2003 World Cup team had a lot of players that were the best or close to the best in the world in their position. Phil Vickery was their tight head prop. Martin Johnson in the second row. Johnny Wilkinson at fly half. Lawrence Dallaglio at number 8. Jason Robinson on the wings or fullback. You had guys like Neil Back and Will Greenwood. Mike Tyndall would also be in the consideration for, one of the best players in his position. And it goes on through the team. And Ireland, honestly, I think they've got the kind of aura and they've got the feeling of England 2003. Because you look at the profile of some of those guys, you've got experience, you've got some players with 100 caps, plenty of players with 50 caps, but equally you've got young, dynamic guys that are just coming in and raising the whole standard overall. And I guess the question is, how much of this is down to the collective and how much of this is down to the individual? Well, I don't think you can separate the two. I think you'd be putting the cart before the horse if you say one. You need both. And a team of great individuals, brilliantly coached and cohesive and with good rugby brains, and you've got World Cup winning contenders. Andy Farrell's clearly doing a brilliant job, which pains me to say because I would love him to have been England head coach right now. And you've got, I just think about the Ireland teams from 2015 and 2019, and there was the so-called golden generation when you had O'Connell and O'Driscoll and these big names. But 2019, in the team that got pumped by New Zealand in the quarterfinals, there was Rob Kearney, who would have been up there as one of the best in the world, Jacob Stockdale at the time, Johnny Sexton at the time, Tadhg Furlong, Gary Ringrose, Andrew Porter was involved. So they had quite a lot of good players, admittedly, but not across the park in the same way that they do now. And what's more, some of the guys that were involved that day are 4 years older, are 4 years wiser, and in some cases, 4 years better. And I think Ireland are very much the real deal. When you look back to 2015, when they lost to, was it Argentina? They got pumped in the quarterfinals. And you look, and we thought then, what a good team Ireland have got. It does not compare to what they have right now. So I just think, look at those 9 names and think about the ones that aren't involved that are really good players as well. And the sense of confidence and aura you're going to have looking around a dressing room at those faces, you're going to know you've got the beating of anyone on any given day. And they're in the hardest half of the draw in the Rugby World Cup. This could absolutely be Ireland's year. I also know enough Ireland rugby fans to know that they're just assuming the curse is going to continue and it'll be a World Cup quarter-final. But my goodness me, they're doing everything they can to make sure that's not the case.